Whites, Jews, and Us, Toward a Politics of Revolutionary Love by Houria, Bouteldja. This is a quick disclaimer that throughout this text there are certain slurs or pejoratives that as a white person are not mine to say. When they come up in the text, I will simply skip over them, but will include a screenshot of the text on the screen where you can read through that portion of the book if you are interested. Chapter 1. Shoot Sartre. Shoot Sartre. The French philosopher takes a stand in favor of Algeria's independence. He comes under fire from thousands of veterans on the Champs-Élysées on October 3, 1960. Sartre is not Camus. Sartre's first revolt, he confessed, was to discover at the age of 14 that the colonies were a seizure on the part of the state, and a totally discreditable action. To which he added, "The freedom that made me a man made colonialism something abject." As far as colonialism and racism are concerned, true to his adolescent conscience, he would almost never go wrong. He would mobilize against the cancer that is apartheid, against the United States segregationist regime. He would support the Cuban and Viet Minh revolutions. He would even declare himself a suitcase carrier for the FLN. No, he is decidedly not Camus, whom the Algerian poet Kateb Yassine would pronounce a relentless indictment. Killing a European is killing two birds with one stone, eliminating in one go oppressor and oppressed, leaving one man dead and the other free. Sartre never claimed to be a pacifist. He demonstrated this once again in 1972 during the Olympic Games in Munich. In accordance with his commitments in Algeria, he regarded terrorism as a terrible weapon, to be sure, but argued that the oppressed have no other recourse. For him, the Black September attacks, which claimed the lives of 11 Israeli teammates, succeeded perfectly, given that the Palestinian question had finally been presented to millions of television viewers across the world more tragically than at the UN, where the Palestinians are not represented. Sartre's blood was shed. I find it easy to imagine Sartre's devastation when he took a stand in favor of Black September. He mutilated his soul. But this was not the fatal blow. Sartre survived. For indeed, the man who wrote the preface to The Wretched of the Earth had not yet completed his task, to kill the white man. Sartre is not Camus. But he is not Genet either. For beyond his empathy for the colonized and their legitimate use of violence, for him, nothing can dethrone the legitimate existence of Israel. In 1948, he took a stand for the creation of the Jewish state and defended Zionist peace for an independent, free, and peaceful state. Following in Simone de Beauvoir's footsteps, he supported Jewish immigration to Palestine. The Jews must be armed. This is the UN's most immediate task, he declared. We cannot turn away from the Jewish cause unless we also accept our treatment as murderers. And he continued, there is no Jewish problem. It is an international problem. It is the responsibility of the Aryans to help the Jews. The problem involves all of humanity. Indeed, it's a human problem. In 1949, he would say, we must rejoice that an autonomous Israeli state has legitimated the hopes and combats of Jews throughout the world. The formation of the Palestinian state must be considered one of the most important events of our era, one of the few that allows us today to preserve hope. Whose hope? He who declared, it is the anti-Semite who makes the Jew, now prolonged the anti-Semitic project in its Zionist form and participated in the construction of the greatest prison for Jews. In a rush to bury Auschwitz and to save the white man's soul, he dug the Jew's grave. The Palestinian was there, just by chance. He crushed him. Sartre's good white conscience, it is this conscience that prevents him from completing his task, to liquidate the white man. In order to exterminate the white man who tormented him, he would have had to have written, killing an Israeli is killing two birds with one stone, eliminating in one go oppressor and oppressed, leaving one dead man and the other free. To resign himself to the oppressor's defeat or death, even if he were Jewish. This is the step Sartre did not know how to take. This is his failure. The white man resisted. Is philosemitism not the last refuge of white humanism? In his editorial in Le Temps Moderne, dedicated to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, published a few days before the war in 1967, Sartre sticks to his guns. Though he's upset by Israel's excesses, his fidelity to the Zionist project remained intact. Josie Fanon, Frantz Fanon's widow, would reproach him for having become associated with the hysterical clamoring of the French left, and would ask Francois Maspero to remove Sartre's preface to The Wretched of the Earth from future editions. There is no longer anything in common between Sartre and us, between Sartre and Fanon. Sartre, who, in 1961, dreamt of joining those who make human history, has passed into the other camp, the camp of the assassin, the camp of those who kill in Vietnam, in the Middle East, in Africa, in Latin America. No, Sartre is not Genet, and Josie Fanon knew this. In 1975, did he not protest along with Mitterrand, Mendes France, and Malraux, an admirable bunch, against the UN resolution that rightly assimilated Zionism with racism? Fucking Arabs, their stubbornness in denying the existence of Israel delays the evolution of the Middle East towards socialism, and postpones the prospect of peace, which would alleviate the Sartrean spleen and its bad conscience. In 1976, his wish was granted. The Egyptian president, Sadat, would visit the memorial to the martyrs of the deportation. The same year, he received the title of Doctor Honoris Causa from the University of Jerusalem at the Israeli embassy. Sartre would die an anti-colonialist and a Zionist. He would die white. This would not be the least of his paradoxes. In this way, he stands as an allegory of the post-war French left. Sartre does not belong to the wave of new philosophers, and cannot, in all decency, be held accountable for the advent of social democracy and its cardinal mission, to bury socialism in order to save capitalism. If the current left's actions reflected its commitments, we would be all the better for it. However, we have reason to believe that the left's whiteness has affected its constitution. Sartre did not know how to radically betray his race. He did not know how to be Genet, who rejoiced at France's defeat to the Germans in 1940 and later on in Saigon and Algeria. He rejoiced at France's thrashing in Dien Bien Phu because, you see, occupied France was also colonial France, was it not? Wasn't the France of the French resistance also the same France that would go and spread terror in Sétif and Guelma on a certain 8th of May, 1945, and then in Madagascar and in Cameroon? The debacle of the French army was also that of the great military corps who condemned Dreyfus, wasn't it? For, to be sure, there is class conflict, but there is also racial conflict. What I like about Genet is that he couldn't care less about Hitler. And paradoxically, in my eyes, he succeeded in being a radical friend to the two great historical victims of the White Order, the Jews and the colonized. There is no trace of philanthropy in him, either in favor of the Jews, the Black Panthers, or the Palestinians. Rather, there is a deaf anger against the injustice that was done to them by his own race. Didn't he welcome the suppression of the death penalty in France with cynical indifference, while propriety called for sanctimonious emotions and celebrated this new step towards civilization? Genet's position falls like a guillotine on the white man's head. As long as France does not engage in what has been called North-South politics, as long as it is not more concerned with immigrant workers or the former colonies, French politics doesn't interest me at all. Whether or not white men's heads get cut off or not doesn't particularly interest me, because creating a democracy in the country that used to be called the metropole in relation to its colonies is still to be creating a democracy that works against black countries, Arab countries, and others. There is something like an aesthetics in this indifference toward Hitler. It is visionary. Was it necessary to be a poet to achieve this grace? The main political group's compulsive eagerness to turn the Nazi leader into an accident of European history and to reduce Vichy and all forms of collaboration to simple interlude could not fool the angel of rhymes. I use the term indifference, not empathy, not collusion. Could he revile Hitler and spare France, which had shown itself rotten in its treatment of people in Indochina and Algeria and in Madagascar? Intoxicating is how he described his feeling toward the French defeat against Hitler. How could one cheerfully rejoice at the end of Nazism, all while accommodating the genesis of colonialism and the pursuit of the imperialist project by other means? Could one recklessly isolate the Nazi moment from all other Western crimes and genocides? Did one have the moral right to take the Germans to task while offloading the French, the British, and the Americans? This brings to mind Césaire, for whom Nazism was a form of colonization of the white man by the white man, a shock in return to the European colonizers. A civilization which justifies colonization calls for its Hitler. I mean, its punishment. Indeed, Hitler, writes Césaire, applied to Europe colonialist procedures which until then had been reserved exclusively for the Arabs of Algeria, the Kurds of India, and the blacks of Africa. Another thing I like about Genet is that he doesn't have any kind of obsequious feeling toward us. But he knows how to discern the invisible proposition made to white people by radical activists of the black cause, the Palestinian cause, and the Third World cause. He knows that any indigenous person who rises up against the white man grants him, in the same movement, the chance to save himself. He intimates that behind Malcolm X's radical resistance is his own salvation. Genet knows this, and every time an indigenous person gave him this opportunity, he took it. This is why Malcolm X loved Genet from beyond the grave. It is only between these two men that the word peace has a meaning. It has a meaning because it is irrigated by revolutionary love. But Malcolm X cannot love Genet without loving his own people above all else. It is his legacy to all of the world's non-white people. Thanks to him, I am an heiress.